Hello everyone, I'm Todd McCluskey, acupuncturist in Washington, D.C. And what I want to do is put out some videos to give us something to chew on, to think about, maybe have conversations about online, because right now, contextually, we all know where we're at, but if you watch this video, say, 6 months from now or a year from now, this is Wednesday, the 25th, March 25th, and we're in the middle of the corona pandemic. So right now in DC, we're all pretty much locked down. It's no essential, or only essential businesses are running. And my wife and I closed our practice basically the beginning of last week. So we've just been at home, chilling, cleaning the house, building a pantry, prepping food like there's gonna be a natural disaster, cleaning the house some more. Did I say prepping food, rearranging the freezer, closing up a practice, all this sort of stuff. And now a lot of that is done. So quite frankly, cabin fever is setting in. You might be able to relate. So in the midst of all of that, I thought, well, I've wanted to put some videos out to really get into detailed conversations about acupuncture points. And I think this is the perfect time. So this could be something we could talk about on Facebook or something like that and have interesting conversations, maybe interesting clinical conversations. It'll be fun. So that's the intention of these videos. I'm going to start with a series of videos on points. And today we're going to start with Triple Energizer 3. Now, step back just 1 second. I'm not going to do high editing of these videos. I'm going to try to be concise, but it's not my nature. But I figure most of us have a lot of time in our hands. So if this is entertaining to you, please take it, enjoy it. And if it's not, just watch it on like speed level 2 and zoom right through it. Any which way, Triple Energizer 3. I particularly love this point. It's called Middle Eyelet Zhongju, I believe it is. And it's a shoestring point on the Triple Energizer. And it's right around this area here. Why I love this point is it's a point that I discovered its capacities. And what I'm going to talk about today about Triple Energizer 3 is something that I discovered on my own. I didn't read about it. It wasn't something that somebody told me. I kind of stumbled on it. And I wanted to share how I use this point with everybody because it gives kind of just an interesting twist to its use. And maybe it makes it more practical for you in the future. Also, part of this video is I want to get into like really specifics on needling. Like how do I actually needle it to make the effect I'm talking about? So let's back up. I'll tell you a little bit about the story about how I came to use Triple Energizer 3. Then I'll get into needling and then cast it off into the great internet to see what comes out. I think to begin this story, I have to go back, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years. And so about 4 or 5 years ago, how I would treat a lot of sore throats through acupuncture would be a combination of distal and local points. And that's, just doesn't mean a whole lot. What I do is kind of like a little tenting technique on the throat where I just go boop with a needle, like really shallow insertion, is pull, pull, pull. And that usually knocked out sore throats pretty well, actually. Very shallow insertion. It was something I learned from a sinew class that I took one time where you can just tap a needle in, you twist it, and you pull it out, and the skin kind of tense. And then it's annoying, it's uncomfortable, but it worked so well for sore throats. And I would do that, and I would use maybe some other points, particularly large intestine 11, which is really a classic point for cooling. So I would do that, some tenting. One day, I did some tenting. It got rid of most of it, but it didn't get rid of the whole thing. And I wanted to kind of practice a little bit more on channel work at the time. So I was like, okay, we'll do large intestine 11. And so I'm engaging with large intestine 11 on this person, and I'm pulling the chi and the channel, and it's not really impacting their throat. Now, maybe I just didn't needle it well. That could be the case. But I thought, you know what? Let's try another point. Let's try another point on the yang channel of the hand. And I have 2 left, right? Triple Energizer and I have small intestine. And I'm thinking throat, so I'm not really thinking small intestine. So I'm like, well, let's just do Triple Energizer. I think it goes to the throat or something like that. It definitely has to do with cooling. So let's utilize it. then I thought, well, what point do I want to utilize on the Triple Energizer channel? And there's Jingwell, Ying Spring. That's a classic kind of cooling point, right? But I wanted to really work it a bit, and so there's just not a lot there to work. It's a beautiful point. I use Ying Spring points. Nothing against them. But I decided, well, let's just creep it a little bit deeper into the channel. Let's go to the shoestring point. It gets a little deeper there, and I can engage the chi a little more readily and have a better sense of what I'm doing through the needle. So I went to Triple Energizer 3. And I began to work the point, and to my wonderful surprise, the person's sore throat cleared up right then and there. So this is pretty cool. So then from that point on, that was the first point I used. I used Triple Energizer for any sore throat. Just kind of dive in there because I was excited that I discovered something, and I wanted to learn the boundaries of that point. And in order to learn the boundaries of an acupuncture point, well, you have to use it. And you have to use it, and you have to find out where it doesn't work. You have to find out where it does work. And then that will steer you. And you kind of have to fail a bunch of times to really know that you're truly failing. And you have to succeed a bunch of times to know you're truly succeeding. So I used that point as my first go-to point for sore throats for a while. And what I discovered is that it does particularly well with dry sore throats. And nowadays, when I have a patient that has a dry, sore throat, boom, works like a charm. Can it help with more of a damp, phlegmy sore throat? Yeah, I mean, it can totally, but it really shines with dry sore throats. Which also leads me to the next thing that you'll notice when you needle Triple Energizer 3 well, is that it will make your patient salivate. And that's also why it's a pretty cool point, because when you needle it, you're getting an interesting physiological response happening right away if you needle the point right. And I'll discuss that in just a second. So when I needle Triple Energizer 3 for sore throats, I'm looking for one, is a throat dry or moist? If it's moist and wet, then what I'm going to do is, or phlegmy, then I'm going to probably drain some of the phlegm out. And maybe that'll be a different discussion. Stomach 40 is typically how I do that sometimes. Kidney 6, those are really good for phlegm in the throat, particularly kidney 6. But any which way, I might try to drain the phlegm out first. Then, as that drains out, I'll go use Triple Energizer. It works pretty well, but it just shines like the North Star when you have a dry, sore throat. So that's where I'd say you want to really utilize it. Now, I also said it'll make the person salivate. So it does something for generating fluids in the throat, which is pretty cool. And it's an interesting reaction because it's pretty surprising for the patients when you get it. When you get it just right, because when I'm needling my patient, what I'm often doing is I'm often having a dialogue with them to make sure that the point is doing what the point should do. There are many times when I'm needling and I'm having this amazing moment where I'm needling the patient and it's like I'm needling them and I know my higher self is connected with my spirit guides and the angels are aligning the planetary movements. You've probably experienced this before, and it's coming down, all the chakras are lined up, you're in the moment, you're having this kind of a psychedelic DMT unfolding experience, and you ask your patient, what are you noticing? And they turn to you and say, oh, I don't know, I don't feel anything. So, it's all in jest, of course, but it's really good as you're needling to have a dialogue with your patients, because you could be clearing their karma for the next 10 lives that they're going to have. But the question here is, are you also clearing their sore throat? So regardless about what you experience, you want to check in with your patient. Now, of course, I don't want to take anything away from practitioners really tuned in and can feel in themselves when certain things are happening. I mean, it happens with me too. But it's always good to check in with your patient, because we can often fool ourselves into thinking we're doing something good. There's nothing happening at all. Just sort of demoralizing when that happens. Any which way, when you're needling this point, I really suggest that you ask your patient if they are salivating. Once you feel like you got the chi and you've worked it a little bit, ask them, are you salivating? And they should say, yeah. And then ask them, could you swallow once or twice and then tell me, how does your throat feel? And by triggering the swallowing reflex or having them swallow a little bit, it moves the fluids in their throat and it gives them a chance to re-sense their throat. Sometimes if you have a sore throat, it's sort of in the back of your mind, but when you swallow, that's when you feel it. So it moves the fluids and it moves the chi that's stuck there when you have a sore throat. Just ask them to swallow once or twice, boom, and then ask them, how's your sore throat? Now the answer should be, oh my God, it's better. If not, what you need to do is you need to keep on that point or readjust. Or in some cases, go to the other side. When I'm needling Triple Energizer 3, I typically will just needle one side and that does the job. And maybe in, 30% of the cases, I'll have to go to the other side and needle the other side to finish it. And so for me, because of the delicate area, I don't want to sit there and needle Triple Energizer 3 for like 5 minutes. I want to get in there, work it a little bit, and get my good effect. If I don't get enough, I'll need a little bit more. But if it seems like it's plateauing, I don't work it more, just dig in. I just go to the other side. And that almost always knocks it out. Okay, so Triple Energizer 3, what we have is dry, sore throat. The noticeable effects are, it should be moving some chi in the throat, it should be cooling the throat and generating fluids. So that's what you want to be thinking about, moving chi in the throat, generating fluids, cooling some heat, right? Now, how do you actually make that happen? And this is the part that I'm really interested in discussing because I find quite often there's not a lot of juicy conversation around needling points. So I've kind of taken it onto myself to put a great deal of focus of that in my practice. How do you really needle a point? How do you get to the point? How do you work the point? And in doing so, it's opened up a whole kind of chasm and exploration of what points actually are. For instance, I've made it a habit of trying to see how big an acupuncture point can be sometimes. So for instance, when I look at something like stomach 36, for me, stomach 36 isn't one little small point that, you go down and you're like, oh, it's right there. No. What I have found in my practice is that stomach 36 is probably something like 1.5 inches, maybe more like an inch long. It's deep, at least the effects that I'm looking for. It's deep in the leg, maybe 30 millimeters, sometimes 40 millimeters into the leg, and a little bit more centrally focused. So you're not needling like down, you're needling into the core of the leg. And you can needle stomach 36 and have the reaction that I'm looking for, which is a sense of warmth, of fullness, to move the chi in the abdomen, to have that visceral reaction in the abdomen. It's not one little space that you can find. It's actually an area that's deep in the body. When you get to that deep area, boom, it just happens. Same thing with Shenshu, bladder 23, the kidney shoe point. When I'm needling that's actually, from my experience, a pretty big point. It's like maybe 1.5 inches wide, and it's maybe 40 to 50 millimeters, sometimes 60 millimeters into the person, depending upon their flesh and their muscle. And it really spans a couple acupuncture points. When you get into that region, I can be a little bit low, I can be a little bit lateral. That's when the whole magic of the point works for me. So as you begin to really pay attention to your needling technique and exploring, you'll find that the body is not the way it's seen on an acupuncture chart. That meridians are not exactly these little threads that go through the body. That acupuncture points are not these just little dots, these little teeny holes. There's actually something deep in the body that's special that you can address. Doesn't mean that acupuncture points aren't sometimes these little teeny dots, these little teeny like buttons on the body, but sometimes there's something else. And so anyway, that's a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's very important as I begin to talk about acupuncture points, is that you want to look at these points as being not just a little teeny dot, that if you just touch with the tip of your needle and turn to the right or turn to the left, you're just going to activate the whole mechanism. It's not how it really seems to work. Now, coming back to Triple Energizer 3, all of that I just said is just to open up some doors, open up some ideas, but also because that's in the back of my mind when I'm needling any acupuncture point. So if I'm going to discuss how I'm going to needle any acupuncture point, you want to at least know the context that I'm coming from. And so for Triple Energizer 3, what I'm looking at is first we have to understand the area here. So it's right here. I think that's the 4th metacarpal. This acupuncture school is way back when I did point location. Anyway, it's just proximal to the distal phalange, or the distal joint of the 4th metacarpal. And so it's in this little teeny nook. Now I have not experimented to see how far down I could needle. And I have not experimented much in terms of where I needle this point because it's such a delicate area. And there's a lot that you're going to have to work around here. I think in the future I should experiment and see how far down I can needle and still have a positive reaction on the throat. My suspicion is that I can probably get somewhere in this whole area, but we'll see. Now, it's right in there, and this area is not super deep. It's not like, I mean, it's depending upon the size of your hand, it's not super thick. It's maybe like not even an inch thick, or maybe an inch thick here. So you're not going super deep into the point or into the flesh. And what I try to do is I try to get it as tucked in to that little nook as possible, that little turn in the phalange, or not the phalange, in the metacarpal right here. A little turn there, because I want to be precise, because it's such a delicate point. I don't have to re-needle this point. If I have to re-needle stomach 36, I don't care. If I have to re-needle another point, I don't care. It's not that big of a deal. But when you get into more delicate areas, I want to be very precise. And to be very precise, I want to hit it the same way every single time. So that's why I'm much more specific about this point. Now, so you find in there, you're going to tuck it in towards the bone, but you don't want to scrape the bone. It's not a problem scraping a bone, but you're not going to get the point here if you scrape the bone. So you can be close, tucked in, and when you needle, the depth, well, first of all, you needle until you hit thickness. You're going to hit your first layer of thickness, and that's going to be the point. That's going to activate the effect. Now, how deep is that? About 10 to 15 millimeters. About 10 to 15 millimeters is what I usually will needle to get it. And I've done some estimations where I'll needle in, I'll take another, I get the point, I take another needle, I turn it with the hilt down so I can measure and compare the insertion of one needle versus what's the actual length, so I can see how much I'm actually needling. Every now and then it's good to do that just so you can gauge your depths when you're really exploring an area of the body and you want to get some sort of understanding about how deep you're actually going. So I find it's about 10 to 15 millimeters. You needle down, you hit some thickness. Now, once you're at the thickness, you go just a little bit further, or you just push on the thickness. You don't have to blast through it. In fact, you don't want to blast through it. You want to maybe lean on it or just kind of get into it a little bit. Then what I found is that the actual needling technique here isn't really anything special. You have to engage it. But I've also found that I have not had to specifically use a certain needling technique. I just have to keep an engagement on that point. Whether I ride the point, whether I grasp the chi and pull, 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 just kind of pulling the chi through the channel, or whether it is boom, 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 do a kind of a burning mountain, like laying into it, laying into it, laying into it. It doesn't seem to matter which one I use. You just have to actually engage the chi at that point. And I found that with some points. With some points, it's interesting, you don't seem to need to apply a specific technique to have them have that specific effect. It's like anything you do there is going to trigger off that effect. Some points, if you do one thing, it'll have one effect. And if you do another thing, it'll have another effect, which is pretty interesting. But I have not found that for this. Okay, so you ride the point, ride the point, ride the point. Then what do you do? Well, first, how long do you ride the point? I don't know. It's up to you. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, maybe 10 seconds. It works fast. So say you hit the point, you sink in a little bit, you grab the chi, and you go boom, boom, boom. It tends to be comfortable for patients. This does not end up being actually a discomforting point for them most of the time. So you can work it. Have no fear, just work the point. Then, what do? You dialogue. You ask your patient, do you notice that maybe you have more saliva in your throat or you're beginning to salivate? And what should their answer be? Yes. And usually they're a little surprised. They go, oh, yeah. I say, great. Swallow a couple times and tell me if you still have a sore throat. They swallow a couple times and they'll probably say, no, it's gone. Or they might say, it's better. And then if they say it's better, I always try to quantize. Is it a lot better? Is it a little better? And they'll often say it's a lot better. If they say, oh, it's like moderately better, or it's a little better, then I usually will work it a little bit more, check in again. If it's much better, great. If not, I go to the other side and boom. 9 times out of 10, if I get both sides, they're gonna be better. Again, dry, sore throat. It shines like a North Star. And then what do? I just typically take it out. Once I have that effect, I take it out and the effect of the point remains. It doesn't need to be left in once you've succeeded. When you've cleared the throat, it's clear. I haven't found that you really need to keep that point in. And I typically take it out because it's like, if the person's wiggling their fingers around and stuff like that in treatment, I just don't want it laying in there. So, that's how I often use triple energizer 3. But I want to give a bonus segment right now. This is going to be a little bit of a bonus. So that's when I think about triple energizer 3 as a point, right? I'm needling as a point, meaning a very specific anatomical place to have a very specific effect in the body, right? It's kind of like what a point actually is. If you want to break down, what does a point really mean? It means like in this area of the body, if you needle here, you can have these effects, right? But there's something else that you could do with this point. And there's something else that you can do with triple energizer channel as well. So let's just take it and kind of raise it up a little bit. Now, this happened again, kind of by accident with a patient. Where I had a patient, if I'm remembering correctly, I had a patient, I had a patient, I was working with their throat, but they had it's more like an ENT kind of thing, like there's a throat and ear problem. And I'm clearing their throat out. And as I was taking the needle out, they told me suddenly that their ear felt better. And I was on the right side of the body. I remember I was working on the right hand, and the problem was on the right side. And I thought, oh, and I didn't pull the needle all the way out, but I pulled it up to a certain level, right? It wasn't at that 10, 15 millimeter deep. It was actually quite shallow. And suddenly their ear felt like it opened up. I thought, damn. It's in moments like these that you need to really stop, pay attention to what's happening. You want to freeze time, slow down time a little bit and consolidate it, because you got to take this learning that's occurring, this interesting thing, and hold on to it. So I did, cleared out their ear, and this ended up fitting into other theories and other experiences I had about depths of acupuncture points. So this is where, we start pulling on triple energizer 3, start talking about triple energizer 3, and all of a sudden we really also want to talk about the channel a little bit, because you can work this one point, and if you go more deeply, 10, 15 millimeters, you get to the throat. But if you're a little more shallow, you will ride that channel and get to the ear, which is really cool. I first stumbled upon this with Stomach 40, which if I do Stomach 40, I'll tell you about that story later on. And that was the first time I felt in my practice a very significant difference between like the heaven layer, man layer, and earth layer. Well, for Triple Energizer 3, when you ride that earth layer, or I'm sorry, when you ride that heaven layer, you can ride it through the body. And heaven layer seems to respond that way quite a lot. Like if you're more superficial, you can often kind of skate through the channel. It's like you can kind of zip right up through the body. It tends to have a very fast, kind of quick response. Go a little deeper, and it can have more potent, kind of powerful responses, but it's kind of like almost like you're riding more deeply through the body. So, for instance, if I'm working the stomach channel versus stomach 36, I could be in this roughly the same area, just more deep or more superficial, and you can have vastly different effects because one, you can ride it all the way up to the head. The other one, it's like boom, like it just like lands in the abdomen in a different way. So knowing your depths, knowing where you are in the depths, have a way of allowing you then to direct your manipulation of chi to different places in the body. So if you want to get to the abdomen versus the head when you're looking at the stomach channel, it's not just points, it's also depths. Because you can vary up depths to go from, in the stomach channel, from the deep sinuses to the superficial channel and surface. I mean, anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So peeling back down to Triple Energizer 3, Triple Energizer 3, when you activate it as solely the point, you're going to really get to the throat. If you pull back up, it begins to lose its identity as an individual point. It begins to kind of sit more with the course and the flow of the channel. And I say that because what I'm going to tell you now, you can get to happen all throughout different places on the Triple Energizer channel. It doesn't have to be Triple Energizer 3. That's why it sort of becomes a little bit more generalized. So although I learned how to do this on Triple Energizer 3 when I'm talking about like getting to the ear, like riding the channel to the ear, I typically use Triple Energizer 9 for it just because it's like a little bit of an easier point, you know? It's in a little bit meatier part of the body. You know, I'm always a little cautious because I'll use often stronger needles and some stronger techniques. I'm always looking for ways to alter my needling to best fit the situation, the patient, all that. And so if I just want to ride the channel to the ear, I usually go to Triple Energizer 9 now, but I discovered it with Triple Energizer 2. Okay, so coming back, what am I really talking about? With Triple Energizer, the channel goes up to the ear. So by needling it a little superficially, you can ride that channel up to the ear and even into the ear to a certain degree. I've used this for all sorts of situations. I don't get a lot of ear pain in my practice, but every now and then you'll get congestion in the ear, ringing in the ear, or some ear pain, and this is a great point to release that. Or this is a great channel to release that. Of course, Triple Energizer 2 is good, or sorry, 3 is good, and like I said, I use it often up here, 9, just because it's an easy place to get. So one time, most recently when I was using this Triple Energizer 2, it was for a woman who I've been treating her regularly for different sort of things, and she was out surfing, and her surfboard, she got tumbled off the board, and the board hit her on the ear, hit her on the head, popped her membrane. So burst her eardrum, and a lot of pain, just in a lot of pain. And I treated her. I was just doing treatments to help her get through till she got to surgery to patch her ear, and then help her after the surgery because that was excruciatingly painful, physically and rather emotionally as well. But anyway, this was a point that I'd come to drain out that pain, to bring out some of that chi from the area to give her more time and give her some relief. Now, how do you do this? Well, if you just know how to needle the heaven layer, give that a shot. My description of it is when you needle, so if you're needling Triple Energizer, if you're needling Triple Energizer 3, and let's imagine that this is a cross-section of the area here, boom, 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 right there. Like if I just did a cut this way, and now you were looking at this. the inside of here. I was telling you to go maybe 10 or 15 millimeters, which is maybe halfway through the hand, something like this, to get to the point. If you want to ride the channel, you're just basically piercing the cover and going just a little bit in it. And all of a sudden what you'll feel is you'll feel a little resistance, slight resistance. You just have to pay attention for it. Boop, boop. Ah, you'll get that. Again, grasp the chi, and everything here is so shallow that we're working with. Grasping the chi can't be advancing another 5 millimeters. It's just advancing a little bit. Grasp the chi. And this is important here to grasp the chi because you have to pull, right? You have to pull it. So you grasp the chi and now you pull because we're really working a channel. We're working that channel. So we want to be pulling it almost like we're pulling a sweater. And we're just riding it up the body like that. That's the methodology. Now that works here. It also works here. And I don't use it all over the place, but I know it works at Triple Energizer 9, Triple Energizer 3, excuse me, and then it's going to work all throughout that channel. All you do is you insert the needle, advance it until you find that first subtle resistance. Grasp the chi and then pull. 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 What I'll often do is I'll take a second hand, so grasping the chi, needle, grasping the chi, pulling, second hand here, and then everything is pulling, everything is pulling, everything. Relax into it, drop your shoulders. And you pull for a little bit, and you can often feel when the chi begins to move in the channel, you sort of feel that opening, like, ah, and then it feels like you're moving. It almost feels like you're moving on one of those walkways in an airport, but slow, like a slow one. Imagine you're going on one that runs at maybe a quarter of that speed. It's like you step on there, and then all of a sudden things are moving, but you're not going anywhere. It's like, I'm not walking, but the whole world is moving just a little bit. It feels kind of like that. And I wasn't the person who first came up with that analogy. That was Dr. Fritz Smith in Zero Balancing. He talked about that. He said that's what chi, or energy in his terms, feels like when you really get it. It's like you're on one of these escalators and you just go. But is this going like maybe at a quarter of that speed? You got to watch out, because if it feels like you're flying with the chi, it's not always good. You want it to move, but you want it to be engaged. You still need to have some thickness. Otherwise, you'll lose control of it. And it kind of just goes away. I think it disperses. It's not as beneficial. But you want a little of that thickness, and you pull, and then everything feels like it's just moving. You go, ah, that's it. And then, what do? You ask your patient, hey, how does your ear feel? Does it feel better? Is it opening up? And they're going to say, yeah. That's amazing. Thank you so much. I feel so much better. Anyway, okay, so that's a little something. This video is going on way too long. Just to recap real quickly, Triple Energizer 3. What can you use it for? You can use it however you use in your practice. Beautiful. Also consider using it for dry, sore throats. Right? It moves chi in the throat, it cools the throat, and it generates fluids in the throat. Beautiful, beautiful point. I've even used it to stimulate fluid production to move phlegm, but that's another story. Works brilliantly in the throat. I haven't been able to get it to work in the sinus as well. It seems like it's pretty limited to the throat from that perspective. And then also, what else? When you needle it, try a little deeper than you might do otherwise, 10 to 15 millimeters. Get a 30 millimeter needle and go a third to halfway. Grasp the chi and work it however you want to work it. But it's important that you hit that thickness, and it's important that you work it. It is not a point that needs to be unlocked with a specific kind of key. It just needs to be engaged and talked to. Then, looking at the Triple Energizer channel, more broadly speaking, if you start coming up to a higher level, I don't know how many millimeters this would be, if this is like 4 millimeters or something like that, right underneath the skin, you come to that first little membrane right? They often will just blow through, not even pay attention. Pay attention to it, grasp it, and allow you to travel the whole length of that channel. So it's really a wonderful way to be able to get to the ear. And often when you're doing this sort of channel traveling like this, really working the heaven layer, what you'll find is that often it's more like you pop to the end of the channel. You know, it's not, you kind of work through whatever's in the middle, but really you're popping to the end of the channel in a lot of ways. So it's just some interesting things to think about, talk about. I like to hear what you think. If this is like way too long, just tell me and I'll try to trim these things down. Because I like to put a bunch of these out and maybe just have conversations and stuff like that. Hope you guys are all doing well. The coronavirus is crazy. It's a crazy pandemic in this time. I hope everybody is safe. I really hope your families are safe and that you're safe and that we get through this with as little trouble and as much peace as possible.